Here's a burning question number one, and you guys got to answer this honestly. Back-to-back seasons, Kansas has been ranked preseason number one and collapsed. They lost by 34 last night to BYU, which is tied for the worst loss of the Bill Self era at Kansas. It is the second worst loss of Bill Self's career. His worst loss came 1999, second round of the NCAA tournament with Tulsa against the Duke team that lost to UConn Huskies in the national championship game. And it is the worst loss that has ever been taken by a preseason number one team in the AP poll. So my question to you, T.O., has Bill Self lost his fastball?
I saw the, yeah. Here's the thing. This adjustment in the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years, has been the biggest change in the history of the sport. Mm-hmm. Some guys have done a nice job of figuring it out. Other guys have had a hard time struggling to put pieces together. And, you know, whether it was at Tulsa, whether it was at Illinois, whenever he made that Final Four run with those terrific guards, so D. Brown and Darren, like, he was able to hang on to guys for a little bit. This is hard for him. And I think there's a lot of times where you bring in all these new pieces and people just expect it to go a certain way. The guys have a hard time adjusting to this, at least having a new 7 or 8 players every season. And I think he's fallen into that category a little bit. Has he lost his fastball? I do think there's a guy that can figure it out. It's Bill Self, because he is one of the top 10 best basketball coaches we've ever seen. But the portal, getting the right guy, assuming the right guy is just going to fit from a personality perspective, that's been an interesting thing to watch at Kansas, because they haven't been what Kansas has been over the last 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm. Phantom? John?
Very disappointing. I mean, to say the least. And I just look at this team and thought that they could be a real title contender this year. And I'm just amazed at what I'm watching. I mean, for them to not have an offensive identity. I mean, Bill Self is a terrific coach, but like, their lack of perimeter shot making is the most glaring thing for me, guys. They just all season long have really struggled to make teams pay when they've got open looks. They're just a poor shooting team, and they have been throughout the season. Last night, non-competitive, shows you where they're at attitude-wise. That locker room is lost. I mean, you to get blown out by 34, that matching Bill Self's worst loss of his career in terms of margin, and to only be at 500. No intensity, no attitude, no sense of want. And you bring in Hunter Dickinson, and I thought that he would come into the year wanting to take ownership, wanting to go on that run, wanting to be that guy. Not the same vein as a Zach Edey, but the fact is, he's still got a spotlight on him. And I thought that him, DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, with who they brought in the transfer portal, their portal class was as any in the sport. And now they're sitting here at 8 and 7 in the Big 12. A Big 12, by the way, that's not the SEC. It's not like this Big 12 is just unbelievably great and it has these otherworldly teams. They got a couple of excellent teams, but it's not at the same level. They just lost to Utah and BYU. BYU, let's face it, really good win. Could be a dangerous team in the tournament with the way they can shoot it. They average close to 11 threes per game, but they've been extremely inconsistent. To lose by 34 to that team is embarrassing, especially when you were coming off a loss. They have been a seismic disappointment, and the way that Bill Self's talking, it makes you wonder how much longer he wants to deal with this stuff, because he's accomplished so much in his career, but he clearly is at a loss for words with his team. To say last night that he hoped to do some team bonding, I mean, T.O., you played Division I high major basketball. What the hell? We're doing team bonding in February? It's almost March. Your team better be bonded by now. Team bonding, it better be done.
Yeah, that's never a good thing. And it goes back to the personalities piece. Like, who's evaluating the personalities of these guys before you bring them in? That's the hard part about this whole gambit. And do you have enough continuity with guys with big enough personalities that can bring these new guys in with them? Problem is, their continuity, Hunter Dickinson. So for better or worse, and he hasn't necessarily shown the ability to be a great locker room guy, let alone win huge games. That shit hasn't been his MO. So where's your continuity? And then are you getting the right people in the locker room? Like it's so much more important than people realize, because you're with each other all the freaking time. And if you don't like each other, it makes life miserable.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit sympathetic to the evaluating personalities part, just because when you're bringing in transfers, it's like when you're recruiting a freshman teal, you know this, man. Like you're recruiting them for 2, 3, sometimes 4 years out of high school. So you know the kid, you've seen the kid grow from being a 15-year-old sophomore to being an 18-year-old young man that's ready to go to college and learn and develop, right? You know the family, you know the people around you, like you know everything you need to know about that human being. When you're recruiting these transfers, it's like we're talking like days,
it's 2 weeks,
luckily weeks if you're lucky, and you're relying on people that are incentivized to get that player as much positive buzz as possible to be able to win the bidding war. You're relying on people that maybe don't have your best interest as a coach at heart when they're talking about who that kid is and who the person is. And I don't want to throw anybody on Kansas under the bus, because everything that I've heard, I think one of the biggest issues they have is the fit of AJ Storr as a basketball player. And the word coming out of Lawrence is that they actually really like the kid as a kid. Like he's a great person. It's just he doesn't fit what they need as a basketball player. And the last thing I'll say, and then we can kind of move on from here, is I have a hard time judging Bill Self overall, right? When the problems these last 2 years have kind of been the same problems, right? It's the fact that you have a point guard in DeJuan Harris that can't really shoot, a 4-man in KJ Adams that can't really shoot, and a 5-man in Hunter Dickinson that can't really guard. So if you want to go all in on being a great defensive team, which you can do if you have KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris, it's very tough to do when you put Hunter Dickinson in a high ball screen, and you can kind of get whatever you want out of that high ball screen. You want to be a team that can score a lot of points. Yeah, you know, that's gonna work. But the problem is your best shooter right now is the guy who you want being the guy that you seal in the post and create those angles for, and let Bill Self kind of cook when it comes to scheming up post touches. So it's been the same thing the last 2 years, because that's where the continuity is. And I just think at some point when Kansas moves on from the era of those guys, and I don't want to make it seem like they're horrible basketball players, right? Like
I mean, national championship 3 years ago, but
DeJuan Harris won a national championship. KJ Adams, like I think it's very hard for me to think of a player that I've enjoyed watching and enjoyed following his, like everyone knows the story about what happened with his mom. Like he seems like a really, really great kid. But when you put DeJuan and KJ and Hunter on the same team, on the same floor, and you need them to play 35 minutes a game, it's going to be very difficult to beat high-level basketball teams with that trio. That's just kind of where I'm at with this.
Hey, so, here's another thing too, just kind of as far as bringing guys in. Kansas doesn't have to cast a wide net recruiting high school kids. They get the kids that they want. So, like, there's not a ton of background information on these other portal potential guys. Sorry, Fanta, go ahead. Fanta, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's Kansas. Like this is one of the defining programs in the sport. So we're going to praise them when they're excellent, and we're going to criticize them when they're not. And when there's a standard here, the fact is the last 2 years there's been a high expectation level, and they didn't come close to it last year. And right now they're on the cusp of not coming close to it this year. Now over the last 12 hours, be like they're going to be in an 8-9 game. Okay, let me give you this stat. 84% of teams that were included in the top 6 team reveal by the NCAA Tournament Committee were the team. They're not a 4 seed anymore. They're probably a 5, if not a 6, probably a 6. And yes, forgive me, guys. I'm coming to you from a hotel room that my Wi-Fi was working perfectly last night, and I don't know what's going on this morning. But that being said, here's the deal. They're not going to be in an 8-9 game unless they absolutely drop out and lose a bunch more games, because the committee doesn't want to fall flat on their faces either. They're probably going to be in a 6-11 game if I had to call it still. even after a couple of road losses, because Utah is not particularly strong, but like it's not like these losses are quad 2, quad 3, really. And they still built up a lot of good rapport early on in the season. The fact is, though, like, yeah, it's one of those things where you are a victim of your own success. We expect Kansas to be in the equation at the top of the country every single damn year. It's what Bill Self has built. It's just alarming to see. We're not used to seeing them lose a game by 34 points. And last night, I questioned the effort. I mean, they didn't look like early on that they wanted to be there. That can't be.
Yeah, they spent 4 days together in Utah, and they were ready to everyone was ready to get the hell out of the program by the end of the game on Tuesday night.
10.
Right?
Yeah, blitzed. That's how it happened. They just got